Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning. Hello, Mr. Andrew Lamb. Good to have you online with us today. My name is Luke Dillon, and I'll be interviewing my colleague Andrew to discuss the basics of looking at team corporate restructuring and strategies to optimize your team efficiency. As a crucial aspect in today's dynamic business environment, we'll explore strategies that not only address the immediate needs of the company, but also ensure long-term sustainability and adaptability. So without further ado, let's get started. My first question to you today, Andrew, is what are the key elements that define successful business restructuring, and how do they directly impact team efficiency?
Great question. So I think there's a couple of things, Luke. One, team culture that embraces change. Two, clear objectives, effective communication, and employee involvement. So I think those are the main elements that you've got to look at when you're trying to look at successful restructuring. Team culture that embraces change. How is that team enabled? Do we have the right team members in the organization that embraces change? What mindset do these people have? Do we have the right people on the bus? From a leadership perspective, what are the clear objectives that the organization has that they're moving to? And I think you're going to hear this time and time again. Go with the end in mind. What is the end goal we're looking for? And I think the other big thing, and I think we'll touch on this many times today, but communicate. And when you're finished, communicate again.
In your view, what signals the need for a small business to initiate the restructuring process? When is the right time?
The right time, again, depending upon the organization, but just a rule of thumb, declining profits, changes in the market, and organizational efficiencies. So the numbers will tell you if you need to make a change. The market will tell you if you need to make a change. And again, I think the organizational activities, what's going on, will indicate that changes need to be made within the organization. So I think the three things, the key indicators: profits, revenue, profits, cost, market changes, and then organizational inefficiencies.
So taking that into consideration, what are the most common internal and external factors that trigger this need?
So I think there's a lot of things, right? But I think it boils down to a couple of things. So technological improvements, right? Advancements, competitive pressures, and financial constraints. Let me explain that a little bit more. So technical advancements, what's going on? Where is the market going? You can see everything that's going on with AI today. What are those changes? We can go back a couple of decades, right? What happened when the computers were introduced into the marketplace? How did that change? Globalization, or the restructuring of globalization today, those are making a lot of changes. COVID drove a lot of changes into the market. Competitive pressures, people that are coming into the industries, people that are exiting industries. But businesses enter and exit all the time. So what's going on? I think the financial constraints of markets today, we've seen higher inflation, and that's coming down. We're seeing banks lending less. There's a lot of financial constraints that go on right now in the US. People are looking at their spending habits. There's a lot of financial constraints in that space. I think the three key areas I would look at is the technological side, the competitive pressures, and the financial constraints of any market.
So Andrew, given those things then, how can a business proactively prepare for restructuring before these signals become critical?
So my honest opinion on this one is don't wait for it. Strategic planning. You've got to strategically plan. Spend time strategically planning every year. Do your SWOT analysis, do your competitive analysis. Look at where the markets are going. What's the trends? Looking at some of those leading indicators that are out there. Strategically plan your organization. It doesn't matter what size it is. Strategically plan and be intentional with that. Intentionally strategically plan for where you're moving towards. Then I think you've got to be looking at regular reviews, reviewing your business, reviewing your customers, reviewing your team. being clinical about that, understanding what are the KPIs, the numbers, where is everything going? And then I think the third thing is, how do you become flexible in your operation? In today's dynamic world, and it doesn't matter what industry you're in, you've got to be flexible. You've got to be able to meet the market demand of where the market is going. I think those are the three key points: strategic planning, regular reviews, and then being flexible within the organization.
Now you've reached that point and you've decided you need to restructure. What are the advantages and disadvantages then of the different restructuring systems or models that are available, whether those be downsizing, a reorganization, a merger and acquisition? How do you then decide on which is the best path? And is that based on the size of a business?
So advantages, disadvantages, the list is endless. Let's have a look at a couple of them. Cost savings versus morale impact. Improved focus versus disruption. Market expansion versus integration challenges. So as we look at cost savings and morale impact, when organizations go through reorganization, cost saving measures, what is the first thing that gets into everybody's head? I've lost my job. So understanding that, understanding and being surgical with regards to what you're doing, being very clear on what are you doing and why you're doing it, and the impacts is crucial. So again, advantages and disadvantages in both of those. If we're looking at improving the focus versus disruptions, be very surgical in what are you focused on, where are you going towards, versus all the other disruptions that will go on in that change. Again, one of the things that we've used in the past is having tiger teams that are very focused in the specific area that you're working in, and not allowing those disruptions into that environment, so that they are focused, they're coming up with a plan, this is what we're going to do, and having very clear communications of what does that mean and where does that take the organization. And then I think the other one, as I said, is that market expansion versus integration challenges. So if you're making a change, a restructuring, a model, going after a different market, expanding the market, what does that do internally? Does that disrupt what's currently going on? Do you set a team, an organization that focuses just on that piece of work so that you can focus on that, you can work out the kinks in it, and then within that, then you absorb it into the main operation? What are the learnings from that? How do you take that and then bring that back into the operation? Again, just three things off the top of my head: cost savings versus morale impact, improved focused versus disruption, and market integration or market expansion versus integration challenges.
And that's a great answer. And I think we've touched on this a little bit in that, is how do these models differently impact small and large businesses in terms of team efficiency?
There's a lot of differences, right? So smaller organizations have smaller teams, but the general rule of thumb is the same, right? Scale of change, how much change do you want to incur? How much change are you going to drive? The resources that are available, and then the impact on the organizational culture. And I would say culture is one of the things that a lot of organizations don't think about. It is a powerful dynamic within an organization, the culture that you have. So for a small business, for example, and using project management, time, team, resources, right? What is the time? What's the amount of time that you've got to initiate this project? How much is it going to cost you to make those changes? And what is the team that you're going to, or resources that you're going to align to that project? So again, the scale of change may be large for a small company, but it may be minuscule for a large company, and vice versa. Resources available. Larger companies have a lot more resources. Smaller companies don't. But how do you get creative with the use of those resources, right? Do we bring people in? Do we bring specializations in to overcome those quickly? Then the impact on the organization, again, understanding what is that going to be, that impact on the team, on the culture, and is that going to have a positive impact?
Yeah, that makes sense. So now you've traveled down this road and you've selected your strategy. Now it's a case of implementing that restructuring strategy. In your professional experience, and that's pretty vast, what is the best restructuring strategy to optimize team efficiency, and why do you believe that is the best strategy?
Okay. I'm going to steal this from Mr. Stephen Covey. Start with the end in mind. In any project, in any exercise, what is the end goal you're trying to get to? Right? So what is the end goal? So let's start with the end in mind. Then I think you've got to look at what strategy are we going to use? What's the rationale? What are we going to do? Is this something that's never been done before? Is there something we can learn from other initiatives that have been done before? Is there white papers that are available out there in the marketplace that can understand what you're doing, where you're going? Has it been done before? What was the learnings from that? What's the best use cases? There's lots of those things that are available out there today. And then I think the other one is, how is this going to impact the efficiency, right? So as we're looking at the team, how is this going to impact the team? I think the other thing is, as we're looking at this, is when you're building a team to do this and you're doing this restructuring, who is the team that you want to put in place to work through this? There are specialists. There's different people with different mindsets that you want. And let me give you an example. Do you want somebody that is a master working through huge changes? The answer is probably no, because a master is somebody that digs deep, right? Goes into every nuance and just spends a lot of time gathering all the information. Yes, you're going to need some of those people in different areas, but not to lead it, because they'll want to create a Rolls Royce, not a Toyota, right? The Toyota to get you from A to B. Is it somebody that just wants to do it the right way, right? So the right way people are very structured, very organized, want to do it the right way because they want to give you the end result always. They may not be the right person to lead a restructuring strategy. Challengers are great people. These are non-box thinkers. They're going to challenge the status quo and drive this to the end goal. But again, these people will challenge everything, and they're not everybody's cup of tea. Start with the end in mind. Figure out where you want to go. What is the strategy you want to deploy? Look for some use cases out in the marketplace that have already gone through these steps, gone through this work, and then have the right people on the team to drive it forward.
So when you look at that and how we track things with metrics, what metrics or indicators are most effective in assessing the restructuring strategy and its success in terms of the team's efficiency?
Okay, you're looking for KPIs here, I presume. Let's go down to a couple of, right? So employee productivity, right? Indicators, measurements. How productive are the employees now versus where they're going to be? So again, what is that improvement that we're going to do? Obviously, operational costs. Are we improving the operational costs of the business, right? It's taking us, let's say, 20% of COGS today. How do we get that down to 15% of COGS?
Yeah.
Revenue increases, right? Is this strategy going to get us into new markets? Is it going to give us new revenue streams? Is it going to give us more profitable revenue streams? So those will be measures I would look at. Rate of introduction of new products and services, right? How are we bringing new products and services to market quicker, faster, better? Team collaboration, right? How are we improving employee satisfaction? How are we improving customer satisfaction, right? So all of these are great key indicators to assess whether the strategy is going to be a success, whether the team is engaged and it's working for the team. Because remember, the team are the people that are going to deploy the strategies and get the results for you. So team has got to be a significant part of the KPIs or the knowledge that we're bringing in to these changes. So again, I would go for employee productivity, operational costs, improving revenues, rates of speed of new products or services introduction, changes in market, and then the employee engagement, satisfaction, and collaboration.
Can you then compare the short-term benefits versus the long-term implications of commonly adopted restructuring strategies?
I think the first thing that in my history that I've seen people look for first is cost savings.
Yeah.
So I think the short term is cost savings versus the benefit is a sustainable growth. So if somebody's looking to cut costs, is this going to allow sustainable growth? Where are we reinvesting the money back in for sustainable growth? So is it just a cost-cutting exercise? Or is some of that savings going back into sustainable growth, right? Reinvesting the savings. I think this is one of the challenges that I see with business owners is they don't take some of the cost savings and reinvest it back into growth. I see that as a quick win versus a long win stability, right? Unfortunately, they're all measured to the quarter, hitting the quarter numbers. Smaller businesses that are not traded have better runways, right? And I think that's why Dell did what they did, because they were under the pressure to give the results every quarter. So they brought it back and became private. This is just one of the reasons. But they brought it back private. They made all the changes that they needed to make and then went back public again. So they restructured, reorganized, did what they needed to do, and then they went back into the market. But I think the other thing is, and again, I'm going to harp on this a lot today, but employee morale is a critical thing that we've got to look at, both in a short term and a long term. How is this going to impact employee morale versus implications around how do we constantly improve employee engagement, employee morale? Because the team, again, is the people that are front and center of your clients, your customers, your prospects. We've got to make sure that the employees and the team are constantly engaged. They're communicated and over-communicated to so that they understand where you're going and how you're going to get there. They'll understand that there is cost savings measures that we've got to do. But so long as they can see the long-term growth, the sustainable growth, the majority of them will engage and support and help you drive the business forward.
As an employee in a big corporate, you hear the word restructure, everyone runs or panics. So in your opinion, if you were to give someone in that position as a CEO, or an MD, or an entrepreneur who owns a business, how do you prevent that shudder and losing good people because they don't know what's happening? What's the one thing that a leader can do to prevent that?
I think, first of all, communicate. Again, I go back to start with the end in mind. What's the definition of a leader? The definition of a leader is to inspire others. The definition of a leader is to inspire others that they will take action. I will go back to Richard Branson, right? What's the strategy? What's the goal? What's the North Star? Where are we going? Be very clear on that. Right, crystal clear on that, and go get the right people in the organization, put them in the right roles, and then get the hell out of the way. That's Richard Branson's strategy, right? And I think I concur with him on that, right? As you're making these big changes, and I've been part of this for many years, but you've got to start with where are we going to go? What are we going to do? Part of your job as somebody that's leading transformation is to articulate where we're going, the outcomes, the impacts, what needs to be done, and what is the end result of that. And then having that communication that's digestible and easily digestible by everybody so everybody can get on board to move the business forward. And that is where I believe leaders forget that they've got to create the vision. They've got to create the direction. They've got to inspire people to follow them down the path of where they're going. And once they do, then we get to the North Star. Then we get to a business that's flourishing and driving and it just becomes dynamic and it's exciting to be back in again. People will go through and go through the trenches with you and go through those train tunnels. They will all go through those with you if you clearly articulate where you're going and the outcome.
So just going back now to the restructuring, what are the most significant pros and cons of undertaking a business restructuring in the current economic climate, in your opinion?
Okay, so let's do the cons. These are the easy ones, right? People lose focus. We start restructuring, people lose focus. Everybody lose focus in a way that everything's bad, right? We lose focus on our jobs. We lose focus on where we're going. Everything becomes negative. Cost, right? The cost of doing this, the cost of losing customers, the cost of doing the extra work. So let's be honest. When we're doing restructuring, there's a cost to restructuring. Companies actually announce that there's going to be a cost for these restructuring efforts. There's a cost to doing that, right? And then the other cost is the cost of morale, if not done right. So I think the three significant negatives: losing focus, the cost implications, and the employee morale if it's not done right. Now, let's look at the positives. Businesses become more agile, right? So when we're doing restructuring, it's about agility. It's about meeting the market. So how do we become more agile? How do we become more profitable, right? Profit comes from two areas, which is managing your costs and also increasing your revenues, right? So how does a business become more profitable? And then team engagement. I think through restructuring, it gives us the opportunity to relook at the bus, right? And I use this analogy all the time. But what is the bus that we're creating? What's the journey we're going on? Who are the people? What are the people in the right seat on that bus that we need to move forward with? So when we're doing restructuring, we've got to look, do we have the right people to move the business forward to the next level that we're looking for? And as I tell businesses all the time, as you grow, some people won't grow with you. Some people won't fit that seat that you need to fill going forward. That's okay. This is an opportunity to get the right people in the right seat to move the bus going forward. So I think the main positives will be become more agile, become more profitable, and get the right people in the right seat.
Definitely. So then looking at the challenges that possibly come with a restructure, what are the common challenges faced during a business restructuring, and how can they be addressed?
Common challenges: employee resistance, communication breakdown, and misaligned goals. Top three all the time. So let's dig into that a little bit. Employee resistance. Employees don't like change, right? Teams don't like change. People like to be comfortable. The majority do, right? There are the challengers out there and better way people that just thrive on that. But most people don't like change, right? It's a human nature, right? So getting over that change, getting over that resistance is one of the big challenges. Communication breakdown. Not communicating effectively. Active listening skills get thrown out of the room when we're having conversations like that. It's this is what we're doing, this is how we're going to get there, this is where we're going. You got to listen. We got to play things back, right? So active listening skills, employee growth mindset, right? Those are the things that we've got to instill in our teams as we move forward. And then I think misaligned goals, again, as I go back when I said earlier, we've got to go with the end in mind. We've got to set the North Star, where we're going. And what does that mean to everybody? That's the job of the leader. When we're looking at this, make sure we overcome employee resistance, we don't have communication breakdowns, and we're not misaligned on goals, because those are the key challenges of any transformation.
So can you discuss strategies for communicating changes to employees in a way that minimizes?
Yes. So again, I'm going to go my 3 bullet points on this: transparent communications, employee involvement, and consistent messaging. So being transparent is absolutely key. People will talk. People will come up with their own version of the truth. So if you allow their versions of the truth to get around, it's because you're not being transparent. You're not engaging the team in transparent communications, right? Be honest with people. People appreciate honesty. People appreciate transparency. And of course, if you're going through some major things, there are things that happen in boardroom conversations that can't be shared. I get that. I'm not naive. But be as transparent as possible. Employee engagement. I've been on some fantastic projects where massive team involvement, collectives that came in to solve problems and giving them the time and energy and effort and tools to help through that process. Now, again, you can get into analysis paralysis. You've got to get the right people in the right room, but make sure you've got involvement. Make sure that people have a way to communicate and bring their ideas and their thoughts and concerns. I'll give you a quick example on that. We did a merger and acquisition, and they had an FAQ space that people could go and look for information, but also ask questions. And every question that was asked was treated as an opportunity, was treated as engagement. And it was always supported, and people were rewarded for asking questions, right? So that involvement, that engagement drove a passion to move this project forward. Actually, one of the most successful ones that we did. But having that involvement, having that engagement was really crucial. And then I think the other one, as I go back to that consistent messaging, right? People understanding that messages is coming at a certain time. Having town halls, having one-on-ones, having newsletters, right? Having emails, thanking people, right, for their engagement, but constantly messaging. And as I talk to business owners that are acquiring businesses today, I tell them, you've got to, when you're taking over a business, you've got to communicate. And when you think you've over-communicate, communicate again, right? You've got to, I think it's 17 touch points for people to understand what you're doing and where you're going. 17. It's not one meeting. It's not one discussion. It's 17. Again, I would say transparent communications, employee involvement, and then consistent messaging will be my key three.
Okay. So looking at that, I've got two questions come to me out of that. The first one is, Andrew, what platform, quickly, if you can share, did that merger and acquisition use for those questions and answers? Because I think for our audience, that might be valuable to know whether it was an intranet or just if it was something very simple that they used that made it extremely visible. And secondly, when you consider that some businesses that will go through a restructure might have 200 staff and some might have 2,000, how quickly should that messaging be cascaded through the organization?
So let's not overcomplicate things on discussion. Discussion boards are easy to set up. Slacks are easy to set up. Discords, things like that. There's lots of things out there. There's no one good tool. Just so you have a tool that is having people on the back end responding. From when we did it, we had a custom tool that we had, but there's lots of tools out there today. The timing of communication, again, it goes back to strategy, right? Come up with a communication plan. Come up with a plan of when you're going to communicate and what you're going to communicate and how you're going to communicate. Disseminate that down through the organization. Large organizations, we had strategic meetings of the executive team, and then we brought in the next level of team to update them and share with them and get their feedback on. Then we would have the next level of conversation down. But then we also had town halls, right? Just open-ended questions. We would have those. But the way that we did it is we structured it in a way that people knew stuff was coming. Because again, people don't like surprises. So again, structure it, have a strategy for it, and tell people, hey, this is how we're going to communicate. And this is the timeline on how we're going to do it.
That's really helpful. So looking at that, what are the key benefits and the potential drawbacks of aggressive versus conservative restructuring approaches?
Okay. Good question. Not a lot of people think about this one. Benefits and drawbacks of aggressive versus conservative. Aggressive transformations versus stable, right? So are you looking for aggressive changes, but that will cause a lot of mayhem, right? Or are you trying to keep things stable? Do you have to move aggressively because of a market change, right? Let's take COVID. People had to move aggressively because of COVID. You could literally internally blow up your organization through those rapid transformations, but they may be necessary versus a conservative restructuring, which is going to take time. It may take a year or 2 years. Maybe an ERP change needs a very methodical, stable change, because you can't change everything all of a sudden, because then all of a sudden you're not going to be able to take orders and revenue coming in. You've got to understand the impact to the organization, which really ties back into, do you want a high risk or a low risk, right? Does the organization tolerance requirements have a high risk or a low risk tolerance in it? And then I think the other thing you've got to look at is their innovation versus traditional, right? So are we doing an innovative, iterative process, right? Or are we going to do it just in the traditional way? When you're looking at the people side, who are we bringing in? I go back to the seats on the bus. Are we bringing in challengers? Are we bringing in right way people? Are we bringing in make sense people? What are the types of people that we want in the organization, in that group? Because they will have a different profile of how quickly, how slowly you go forward with. If you're looking for rapid change and rapid improvements, and you want to make things far better than they were, step function changes, then you're looking for challenger right way people. If you're looking for methodical, thoughtful, incremental changes, we're probably going to mix in some masters, some make sense people, some right way people, steady, right? Steady wins the race type thing. It just depends on where you're going, and how you want to restructure determines the aggressive versus the conservative direction.
So how can a business then strike a balance between these approaches to ensure that both immediate growth is achieved and sustainable growth is achieved?
Start with the end in mind, strategic planning. It must start with planning. Without planning, you don't have a plan, right? You have to have a plan. The military spends a lot of time planning. Now, when people get outside the wire, plans go out the window, but everybody knows what the objective is. But strategic planning is absolutely critical. And I can't emphasize this any clearer, critical that you do, because it will give you immediate and sustainable growth, right? Strategic planning, strategic action, strategic intent. Then you've got to manage your risk. What is the risk management, right? How much money are we going to spend on this? What risks are we willing to take? If we're entering a new market, what is the risk profile that we're going to enable and give to our team, right? So, for example, we're going to go into a new market. We're going to spend $5 million trying to enter this market. We know that this is going to be a sunk cost, but nobody's going to get beaten if this is not a success. It's a learning exercise, right? So how are we going to move forward? How are we going to get there? What's the risk involved in it? And how are we going to manage it? So again, this is very much in the leadership domain, is allowing people the ability to fail, but learn. Mm-hmm. So what is the risk in there? And then I think the other thing is, for businesses, adaptability, being flexible internal with processes, systems, and technologies, being adaptable to the market, products, services, customers, being adaptable to supply chains. If COVID hasn't taught us anything, it's taught us these three things, right? I don't know a time in which strategic planning was done so quickly. And then the risk management. How do you manage the risk? Because things were changing on a daily basis, right? Yeah. And we had to manage those risks. By God, did we have to be adaptable? Because one day it came out of the news that you could do this, and the following day you couldn't. Sometimes it was stick your head in the sand. For leadership, it was like, rapid strategic planning, managing risk and adaptability every single day. And since COVID, I think people have slid back into their comfort zone post-COVID. But COVID really taught us a lot of great lessons with regards to how to react immediately and sustainably. Again, I go back to the three fundamentals: strategic planning, risk management, and driving adaptability.
Okay, so given all we've shared today, if I was to ask one last question, can you talk about some of the successful and unsuccessful restructuring cases that you've worked on in the past, either with clients or specifically in your career, and what key factors influenced those outcomes?
I'm not going to name or shame anybody out there. I've got hundreds of thousands of successful and unsuccessful restructuring. There's lots of case studies out there. My dissertation was even on the difference between the digital and compact merger and the HP and compact merger. Great case studies that we did on that. Great learnings in that from businesses, massive organizations that were changing. I've done some recent ones with regards to small businesses today. I think the first thing that you've got to understand is, what is the company culture? What are you buying? What is the culture that you're buying? Does that align with your business? And why I ask that is the first rule of thumb that we look at when we're doing whether restructuring or acquisitions today is, how do you quickly remove the chaos from business? Because chaos will suck time, effort, and energy out of your day quicker than anything. So when you're looking at a business and you're looking to acquire a business, what is the company culture that you have? What is the company culture that the person that you're acquiring has? And how are you going to blend those cultures together? Where do you move towards? If people haven't read The HP Way, which was written in the 60s, fantastic book around company culture. And that culture survived many years, right? But again, I would look at the culture that you're buying into. I will say that in the past, I did a merger with one organization that had a clearly different culture from the culture that we had. That merger was a flaming disaster because the cultures were so different. And not only were they so different that one team was not no, but hell no. And that was never a successful merger. And I think that the breakup afterwards showed that. Number one thing is, what culture have you developed and what culture are you buying into? Look at case studies, right? Learn from what's happened before. Bring experts in that could literally help you overcome this. One of the other things that we've learned is small companies that I'm working with today, smaller, right? 50 plus employees. How much time does it take you to learn those team members, right? They may have worked in this organization for 10 years, but you've now got to work with them tomorrow. You don't have 10 years to learn who they are. So one of the things that we're deploying right now in acquisitions very successfully is the YOS. Learn the people that are coming into your team better than they know themselves, who they are. DISC, right? A communication tool. Learn their DISC profile, Myers-Briggs and all these others. But spend time learning who those people are at the deepest level. And then from that, you can start to support and engage the people. The people in the organization will crater a restructuring quicker than anybody else. The people internally. So you've got to get the people on board internally. And the other part is, you've got to communicate externally. What's your communication plan to your customers? What's your communication plan to your suppliers? Again, I go back to strategic planning. You got to spend time internally, but you've also got to spend time externally communicating, because you don't want to, upset your customers, your loyal customers externally and your potential customers. And you also absolutely don't want to disrupt your supply chain, especially if you've got a single source supply chain. So communicate internally, communicate externally, put structure in place, and truly learn who your people are.
Yeah, that's great advice, Andrew. And that brings our interview to an end, and I'd just like to say a very big thank you to you, Andrew Lamb, for sharing your insights on corporate restructuring strategies. I think today's discussion has been incredibly enlightening. So to recap, successful corporate restructuring isn't just about immediate efficiency gains. It's about creating a flexible and sustainable framework that can withstand future market changes. The strategies discussed, from effectively communicating changes to minimize resistance to incorporating adaptability for long-term success, are critical for any organization to stay ahead in today's business environment. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. We hope you're walking away with actionable insights that you can apply in your professional roles. Subscribe to our channel to stay updated on our future uploads, and feel free to connect with us at www.fourleafperformance.com. And until next time, all the best.
Thank you, Luke. Take care.